Gurdjieff once startled his listeners with the uncompromising statement, "Man has no individual I, but there are instead hundreds and thousands of separate small I's, very often entirely unknown to one another, never coming into contact, or on the contrary, hostile to each other, mutually exclusive and incompatible. Each minute, each moment, man is saying or thinking I, and each time his I is different. Just now it was a thought, now it is a desire, now a sensation, now another thought, and so they go on endlessly. This is the blow that begins the work, the recognition that we do not possess what we imagine we have. The human tragedy is that we mistake this shifting parade of phantoms for a unified self. Ouspensky, hearing these words from his teacher, could only describe the shock. This was the first time I realized clearly that the whole of our life, the whole of our so-called inner life, is nothing but the uncontrolled play of our different little I's. There is no master, no one in charge. We think we are free. We speak of choice, of destiny, of our carefully constructed lives. But if we are honest, we must admit that every so-called decision we have ever made can be traced back to accidents, a chance meeting, a book picked up at the right or wrong moment, the conditioning of parents, the imprint of culture. The edifice of our personality rests not on will, but on circumstance. Maurice Nicole summarized it in plain words. We are machines, taken as we are. We are run by accident. Things happen in us. And yet, paradoxically, within this machine is the possibility of awakening to what is real. This is the central metaphor Gurdjieff gave. The human being is like an airplane flying with no pilot at the controls. The chair is empty, and yet the craft soars through the sky, driven by engines of habit, blown by winds of circumstance, guided by routes set long ago by the accidents of birth and upbringing. This, he said, is the state of man as we find him. Unfinished, accidental, mechanical, and we must see this not as a theory, but as an inner experience. When you observe your mind, your feelings, your reactions, do you find unity? Or do you discover, as Gurdjieff insisted, a crowd of little selves, each shouting I in its turn? Nicole puts it this way: we are a multiplicity. We are legion. Our task is to bring order into this chaos, to establish a permanent center of gravity. Without this, we remain as dust, blown about by every passing wind of influence. Now consider this in light of our modern world. We live in an age that has perfected distraction. Every device, every screen, every message pulls us outward, keeps us from looking within. Our politics, our identities, our social allegiances, they provide us with scaffolding to prop up the phantom self. As Gurdjieff said, man cannot exist without external I. He identifies with everything outside himself, for he has no real inside. This explains the irrational rage when someone questions our political party, our nation, even our favorite sports team. It is not merely an opinion that has been challenged. It is the very scaffolding that props up our fragile sense of self. And so the modern world thrives on division, outrage, identification, because it feeds the machine and keeps us asleep. Nicole saw this clearly in his time, and it is even more relevant today. Humanity is going mad. Everyone identifies with something outside himself, and so loses all possibility of inner freedom. Unless man begins to work upon himself, he will be destroyed by the very forces he unleashes. So what is the remedy? Gurdjieff gave us the shocking answer. The task of a human being is not to find oneself, but to create oneself. He declared, The highest aim and sense of human life consists in the striving to the creation of this permanent I. He who does not strive to this is like a blind man. Uspensky echoed this, writing, "The task is not self-expression, but self-creation. To become what one is not yet, to crystallize, to make permanent what is now fleeting." This is why Gurdjieff spoke not of enlightenment, not of mystical ecstasy, but of conscious labor and intentional suffering. Uspensky records Gurdjieff's words. Conscious labor is doing what one does not wish to do. Intentional suffering is not doing what one wishes to do. These are not poetic phrases, they are technical, practical. Conscious labor means to bring attention, deliberate awareness to the simplest actions of life, walking, eating, speaking, listening, so that they are no longer automatic. It is to resist the machine, to place the spark of presence into moments otherwise lost. Nicole explains, the work of attention, the work of self-remembering is the first form of conscious labor. To receive impressions consciously is the beginning of transformation, for impressions are food, and if taken unconsciously, they feed only the machine. But if received consciously, they create a new substance in us. Intentional suffering is its complement. It is to endure the inner friction when we do not express the negative emotion that clamors for release, when we resist the mechanical reaction that would otherwise dominate us. Nicole writes, the non-expression of negative emotion is the greatest form of intentional suffering, for the whole of life teaches us to vent, to complain, to release. The work teaches us to endure, to bear the fire of this inner pain, and in so doing to transmute it into energy of a higher order. Gurdjieff insisted, the energy produced by the conscious struggle against mechanicalness is the only energy that can form a soul in men. Do we see what this means? The work demands not comfort, but friction. It is not about soothing the personality. It is about burning it away so that something higher may appear. The aim of all this is the crystallization of a permanent I. Gurdjieff spoke of this in scientific terms. If man develops consciously and attains unity, he will then acquire a permanent I. With the acquisition of this permanent I, man will become immortal within the limits of the solar system. Uspensky clarified it further. Man is born without a soul, but he can grow a soul. If he does not, then he dies as he is born, nothing. And Nicole makes it practical. Every moment of conscious labor, every act of non-expression of negativity, every effort to remember oneself leaves behind a trace, a deposit of finer substance. Over time, these deposits gather, crystallize, and a new body is formed. This is the birth of the real soul. This crystallization is not self-improvement. It is not a more refined ego. It is a transformation into something entirely new. As Gurdjieff said, a new body, the Kesjan body, can be born in man, and later a higher body, the body of the soul. But this is not given, it must be earned. And now the larger context. We live in an age of dissolution. Gurdjieff saw this with terrible clarity. The situation is serious. Humanity is moving toward destruction. The sleep is too deep. Only a very small number can awaken, and even fewer will. Nicole wrote during the Second World War, yet his words speak just as urgently to us. The world is in chaos because man is in chaos. The task is not to reform the world, but to reform oneself. This is the only hope for the future. And Uspensky, near the end of his life, said, the world is in the position it is because of sleep. The work is the only way out, and yet the work itself is fragile. It depends on individuals making the effort now in this moment. The work, then, is not a hobby, not a philosophy, not a set of comforting beliefs. It is rebellion against the spirit of the age. It is the decision to swim against the current of dissolution, to build something permanent while the outer world collapses. Look around. Institutions burn, traditions crumble. Truth itself seems dissolved in relativism. It is tempting to despair or to rage, but Gurdjieff would tell us, this is not the point. The outer world has always perished. Civilizations rise and fall. The only question is whether, amid the flames, we will forge something within ourselves that cannot be consumed. Nicole wrote, "The world is a school. It is arranged to teach us if we are willing to learn. The chaos and suffering of history are not obstacles. They are the conditions by which the work becomes possible. And so we come to the ultimate choice. Will we drift with the river of dissolution, or will we struggle with conscious labor and intentional suffering toward crystallization?" Gurdjieff leaves us with this challenge. The choice is simple. Either you die like a dog, or you acquire something real, something that cannot die. And Nicole, echoing him, gives us hope. Remember yourself always and everywhere. If you do this rightly, you will begin to feel the birth of another life within you. This is the beginning of immortality. So the work stands before us in its full severity and promise. It does not comfort, it does not flatter, it demands everything. But in exchange, it offers the only thing worth having, the creation of a real and permanent I, the birth of the soul. In this collapsing age, when the world burns with chaos and illusion, the question is not what will survive out there, but what will come alive within you.